interested in learning tonight, we can greet you and try to meet your needs as best we can. There's Valerie Littman. Hello, Valerie. In learning tonight, we can greet you and okay. So I have somebody here from Point Reyes, Reading, Mountain View. We had people registering from all over the place. Katie from Newark. Mike Roberts. Oh, Mike Roberts. He wrote the heat pump song. Hello, Mike Roberts. It's a great song. Somebody from San Diego, Julie from San Diego, I think. Adrian from Los Angeles, I think it was. Okay, so I think it's maybe about time for us to get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for You Can Do It, 10 Tips to Creating a Bird-Friendly Garden by Brian Dirking. My name is Kathy Kramer and I coordinate the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours and the Native Plant Resource teams. I'm really happy to have all of you with us. I'd like to welcome you to this second presentation in the You Can Do It series. This program is being recorded and it will go up on the tour's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel to be notified when new videos have been uploaded. You'll find the channel on the tour's website. I'd like to introduce Mike May, my husband and best friend and IT guy, and with whom I have both built a wonderful life, and without him, I would be running this tour with a paper and pencil. I'd also like to introduce other friends who I am not married to, but without whose help we would not be hosting this event tonight. And the following people are waiting to answer your bird and plant questions in the chat, so please send them in. And after this presentation, we'll be sending out the links that were posted in the chat. So don't have to worry if you wish you had caught something and you want to just pay attention to the presentation. You can just do that because we'll be sending you the links in the chat along with more links I think that didn't even maybe appear there. I'd like to start by introducing Jennifer Dirking, my friend and great colleague, the dynamo creator of those amazing keystone species signs that you can see on the Garden Tours website. And Jennifer will be online tonight answering questions. So thank you for joining us, Jennifer. And Jeff, would you link to the keystone species signs in the chat now? One of our bird experts this evening is Jeff Minker. And Jeff was one of the first people I met when I moved up here 35 years ago to the Bay Area. Jeff has birded in 42 countries on 6 out of the 7 continents. He is currently teaching birding classes through the Golden Gate Bird Alliance. And of particular interest to this group will be that Jeff, a retired high school teacher, developed and for 5 years taught a year-long high school ornithology class in Gilroy. And about this experience, Jeff wrote, quote, "I believe ornithology should be taught in United States high schools because I believe that high school ornithology can save the world. I think ornithology can save the world because I interact with young people who are on the cusp of figuring out who they are and what they want to do. They can become conservation-minded citizens. I am convinced that high school ornithology is an excellent way to achieve that goal. I am continually amazed by the diversity of students who catch the birding bug: athletes, cheerleaders, stoners, wannabe gang members, special education kids, African Americans, Indigenous Americans, Euro Americans, Asian Americans, rich kids, poor kids, quiet kids and loud kids, fashionistas, drama queens, hunters, vegetarians, LGBTQ kids. I have seen birds take over the lives of every kind of student." So you can read the American Birding Association magazine article about this high school ornithology class, and Jeff will be putting it into the chat now along with his email. So if this is of interest to you, I encourage you to contact Jeff afterward. And again, you'll be getting his email in the chat that we'll be emailing to you afterward. We're also fortunate to have 3 landscape designers with us to help answer questions in the chat tonight. Kelly Marshall and Sandra Neville-Lee have a number of things in common. They are both talented landscape designers. The contact information for both of them is listed in the Find a Designer section on the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours website. And Jeff will put a link to the Find a Designer section into the chat now. Kelly and Sandra are also both affiliated with their local water district's landscape design assistance programs, and they can both draw you a front yard garden plan for $200, which you can be reimbursed for by your water district when you have removed your lawn and installed a garden in its place. So you're joining us probably because you're interested in gardening for birds and you might be interested in making some changes in your garden. So I'm going to tell you, Kelly Marshall is the owner of Kelly Marshall Landscape Design Garden. She has gardens that she has designed have been on the tour every year since 2007. If you live in the Contra Costa Water District service area and you're planning on removing a lawn and putting in a garden, you can get a consultation with Kelly through the Contra Costa Water District's Landscape Design Assistance Program. And we'll put the link to that program into the chat now. For those of you who don't qualify for the Contra Costa Water District's Landscape Design Assistance Program, or if you just would like to pay for a consultation or get a garden designed yourself, Kelly's contact information is under Find a Designer on the website, and we'll put her contact information into the chat now. And now I'm happy to introduce my friend Sandra Neville-Lee, owner of Green Thumb Works. On the day of the tour, on either of the last 2 years, you might have seen Cecilia and Steve's Castro Valley Garden, which Sandra designed. And we'll post links to Sandra's website and to Cecilia and Steve's garden in the chat. And Sandra is on EBMUD's approved list of designers for its Landscape Design Assistance Program. And you may know that in addition to that program, EBMUD has a super rebate program where if you plant more than 50% of your garden with natives, you get double the standard lawn removal rebate, meaning $2 a square foot instead of $1. And Sandra Neville-Lee can design a garden for you that will qualify you for that rebate. So we'll put links to EBMUD's Landscape Design Assistance Program and the Super Rebate Program into the chat now. Our third landscape designer is my friend and Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours host, Valerie Metzger. And it's a pleasure to have Valerie online with us this evening to help answer your questions, both about birds and about gardening. Valerie is an avid birder, and she has a spectacular native plant garden in Piedmont, and she will be answering questions in the chat. And I'd also like to introduce and thank Robin Mitchell, great supporter of the tour and our programs, who will be online with us a little bit tonight, Robin. So welcome to have you. Glad to have you with us. And finally, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Valerie Lippman, our ever helpful and knowledgeable IT maven, without whom the native plant resource teams and this talk series would not be possible. So thank you to all of you for taking the time to help us with this evening's presentation. Let me turn this over to Jennifer, who will take a moment to tell people about the native plant resource teams and how you can join. Jennifer?
Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for the kind introduction. And let me just pull up my share really quick. I have a very, very short slideshow here to just orient everybody with what are the native plant resource teams. My own humble opinion is they're the best thing since sliced bread. So let's see, here we go. Everybody see that okay? Well, great. Well, this is a new program of the Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour. And there's a little backstory here, very briefly. As everyone on this call probably knows, native plants are a hot topic these days, and more people realize like that you can save water, have a beautiful garden, be conservative, but yet most importantly, build back biodiversity that we've been losing at such a rapid rate. And so I say here we have hundreds of plants to choose from. Actually, there's over 8,000 California native plants to choose from. And so you can just really go wild with this. But there's been so much interest in this that literally thousands of people always contact Kathy and say, hey, I have an idea, or I've got some questions, or I could use some help. And Kathy's just one person. And so she had a really brilliant idea to bring people together and have them kind of organized by interest area or by our geographical area and create some real change together. So last November, she and Eileen, her friend, hosted a small gathering, and they thought they'd have about 25 folks show up, and instead there were 90. And teams at that event started to form based on their geography and interest areas, and have continued to convene with each other, to organize, and I say over 500 members now. I think now with this event, we're up to 600 members. So hope if anybody's on this call and hasn't joined, you really consider it. And what do we do? Well, we convene in person or on Zoom like this, or both. We learn from each other and we teach each other how to advocate for native plants and share our success stories and attend lectures, give presentations. One thing that's really been popular is sharing plants and seeds. We've had quite a few get-togethers like the one pictured in the lower left here, where there's big plant swaps and everyone really enjoys that. Um, I'm going to have somebody help my dogs stop howling. I hope nobody hears that. Let's look at a few of the teams we have, though. We have a home gardens team organizing events like this one, where we all learn about different ways of gardening, different aspects. We have the pollinator pathways in public gardens for people who are involved in like trying to fix up those house strips or work in school gardens, things like that. We have a sharing seeds and plants team. We get together every other month and talk about upcoming events we're going to host. Um, Under construction right now, there's been some meetings and some interest around city trees and public policy and a lot of work done in that area. An HOA group's gotten together a few times and also electrified homes. These don't have a consistent leader, consistent meeting schedule, but if you're interested in leading something like this, we're happy to help you. And then geographically, West Contra Costa County team, very active. Tri-Valley, so if you live in some of these areas, and even if you don't, I've gone to events for each of these and really had a great time. So I like to travel from San Carlos to see what's going on in the East Bay. There's a Berkeley team that covers kind of that region. And we're just starting up one over here on the peninsula because a lot of these have been very focused on the East Bay or North Bay, and we're starting to get a lot of members on the peninsula. And then what are some of the things we do? Well, we've had some field trips. We call them choose your own adventure because you can kind of hop on to different parts of the field trip. We went to Learner Seeds, we went to a nursery, we went out to dinner. A group went to Berkeley and toured a few nurseries. We've been out to Livermore and even had a little class on propagation out there. We went to Sebastopol and went to Cal Flora Nursery and lunch at Hopmunk Tavern and Hallberg Butterfly Gardens. And even if you can't make it on one of these, you can look at our itineraries and consider field trips on your own. We're doing one August 3rd. I'll give you a little bit more details about that in a minute, but it dovetails with this bird talk. So hold that date. And then even more field trips, less the multi-stop ones, but going to Martinez and seeing some gardens there, or getting a pruning demonstration or a propagation lecture. These are some of the types of activities that you can participate in. And a little more detail on August 3rd. Following on this talk, we're going to have folks come visit our garden here in San Carlos up on the left, which we have completely oriented toward feeding bees, butterflies, and birds. In particular, our backyard is a bird haven with lots of bird plants Brian's going to talk about tonight. We're going to see a native garden next to our library at the San Carlos Civic Center, and then go see the 50-year-old Woodside Library Garden. So these field trips are open to anybody who joins the native plant resource teams, and the reminders and the links and the addresses all get sent to that group. So if you're listening tonight, you're not in the group, here's links to sign up, and this will all be sent out as a follow-up to attendees. And we're also going to go back to Learner Seeds. That was really popular, but it was at a rainy time of year. So this is another field trip to look forward to. And then again, more information about joining, spreading the word, inviting your friends. And as Kathy often says, let's be the change we want to see in the world by really leaning into all of these great native plant resource team activities. So I just put the contact information for the people who are administering the team and a QR code to these slides. And there's a few extras that I cut out for brevity, but anybody can hold their camera up to the screen and capture the QR code. Or like I said, this will be sent along with the bird slides after tonight's talk. And that I will stop sharing now.
All right. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And let me have one last slide and then we'll go into Brian's talk. So let me say that before we start, if you would help support the tour and the programs we run by making a donation, we'd really be grateful. your funding will go to support the online tour, the virtual tour, the native plant resource teams, talks like this, and 2 conferences that we're going to be holding this fall where we're bringing Doug Tallamy out to speak. You can donate through the tour's website at the Please Donate section. You can donate to with your credit card or PayPal account, and we'll put that link into the chat now. You can Venmo funds at Bringing Back the Natives, or you can mail a check. And the address is there, 1718 Hillcrest Road in San Pablo, 94806. Our website, our address is also found on the tour's website under Contact Me. Okay, so let's get going with tonight's program. You Can Do It, 10 Steps to Creating a Bird Garden by Brian Dirking. So Brian has loved gardening from an early age. For much of his adult life, he's dedicated his leisure time to fruit and vegetable gardening and maintaining a healthy lawn. But in 2020, he realized that he could save time, money, and the planet by converting most of his yard to a native habitat garden. Inspired by Doug Tallamy's Nature's Best Hope, he has planted hundreds of California native plants in his small San Carlos garden to create a lush and vibrant oasis that feeds bees, butterflies, birds, and more. Now that he is freed from the tyranny of lawn maintenance and expense, you can find him lounging in a hammock, listening to birdsong, and admiring the year-round blooms and berries in his garden. So with that, let me turn it over to Brian. Thank you, Thank you, Brian, for joining us tonight.
Kathy, I don't know who wrote that, but that's hilarious. You may have noticed that Jennifer and I have the same last name. We're actually also in the same room, so I'm asking her to mute. Let me share my slides. There we go. Okay. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is part of the Native Plants Resource Teams You Can Do It series, as you've seen. Thank you to Kathy Kramer for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. I'm not an ornithologist. I'm not a master gardener, but I am somebody who loves animals, and I love looking at nature in my own yard. And so I became curious, why am I seeing fewer birds, butterflies, and bees here in the Bay Area than I did when I was growing up? I remember we used to drive down 101 and we had bugs all over the windscreen, and that's all gone. So what I can do is I can share what Jennifer and I have done, what we've learned from watching talks like these, reading books, and attending conferences. And that's really kind of the basis for this. Let me just forward my slides. Forward. So, okay. Huh. Okay, I'll have to figure that out. So there are 10 easy steps for creating a bird-friendly garden. Knowing your customers, choosing your native plants for year-round bounty with all berries, seeds, nuts, nectar, and insects, examining your garden situation, designing your bird-friendly garden, planting in layers with ground covers, shrubs, trees, and vines, providing shelter with thickets and trees and other structures, providing clean water, protecting the birds in your habitat from collisions, light pollution, and predators, providing a pesticide-free and herbicide-free haven, and inspiring others to create bird-friendly gardens. And then, very important, once you've done all this work, to relax and enjoy. This bottom image here is a picture I took from my work desk where I'm sitting right now, right outside my window. And there's a veritable bird bath party. We've lived in this house for 17 years. And this is the first time we've seen bluebirds in our yard. So from my perspective, it's working. I'm very excited about it. And I am seriously going to have to just play each slide from the start. It looks like I'm stumped by that. Huh, okay. Well, bear with me. You wouldn't know that I do this all the time for a living. So one of the things that has really made a difference for us is a difference in mindset. I believe in mindset quite a bit. I find that quite often when there's something that I feel like I don't want to do, I try and think of a way to make it a game or somehow change my perspective on it so that it becomes less onerous. In this case, Jennifer and I, we've reoriented our approach from a human-centric garden to looking the garden as a shared resource with the animals that come through it. But to do that, we need to understand the different birds in our area and what they need.
It says hit F5.
F5, okay, thank you. Let's see if that works. Yeah, even that's not working. Okay. Very sorry. So most birds will eat a variety of foods, but most have a preference, and so what we see here are some of the seed eaters, a dark-eyed junco, California towhee, a house finch, and a golden crowned sparrow as some examples. And so as part of knowing your customers, you need to know what it is that they will eat. You need to think about what foods they need to have. And you need to think about these things in terms of how are you going to facilitate having those in the seasons when they most need it, if they're migratory, but if they're birds that you see all year round, how do you make sure that you've got food for them? In our garden, we often leave things like goldenrod after they've gone to seed. So rather than cut them back, we let the birds have a chance to harvest them. Now, if you find that you're not quite there yet on the idea of an animal-centric garden, if you're thinking that maybe your mindset is not quite there yet, then you can cut them and leave them on the ground so the birds can find them. But we don't mind, leaving them on the plant ourselves. That's actually been nice to see the animals, using the plant and getting on the plants and swaying in some cases while they eat the seeds. A couple of other examples, lesser goldfinch and pine siskin are some that we see in the yard. I'm just going to stay out of the slideshow mode since this isn't going so well here. And then thinking about berry eaters, we see robins, hermit thrush, a northern mockingbird. We have some of these in our area. I love when I walk the dogs in the morning to figure out where is the mockingbird, sitting today and doing its song. And then we have here a cedar waxwing, which I just think is simply the most beautiful bird in the world. Of course, I haven't seen every bird in the world, hard to judge that, but I just love these. I think they're gorgeous. They come to our yard. And interesting thing about them, they are gorge eaters, so they will eat a lot of food. And one particular plant that we've found is heavily bamboo, is poisonous, has toxic, and has, at a certain amount of it can kill the birds. And so that was one plant that Jennifer and I decided we're just going to get rid of heavenly bamboo in our yard. And so this one's eating toyon, which is something that we have a lot of in our yard. We've planted that to try and encourage the cedar waxwings and for many other properties of the toyons. Some examples of nut eaters, scrub jays, acorn woodpeckers. You can see the acorn woodpeckers have placed acorns here in the tree. So they'll actually use the tree as a granary and save those. They have a fascinating life cycle, and their social organizations are very interesting. And there's some really good talks about that we've enjoyed quite a bit. A crow, and then a Steller's jay. And interesting, again, as we've listened to these talks, we've heard about some of the behaviors of some of these birds. And so Jennifer and I sat through a talk one night, and they talked about scrub jays and how they take, oak acorns, and they'll fly, as much as a mile away from the tree. And so they're spreading out the acorns that way. But when they go and they hide those, they'll look around and see if anybody's watching them and see if there's anybody looking. And if they think that they're being seen, then they will take the acorn back out and rehide it. And so Jennifer and I were down in Pacific Grove, and we saw a scrub jay grab an acorn and then start burying it. And then we saw it look at us. And then we saw it dig it back out and fly away. We said, "Oh, we know what you're doing." We found that very interesting. So those are some great examples of nut eaters. Some insect eaters, the bluebird that I was just talking about, as well as this pygmy nuthatch we have all over our oak tree out front. oak titmouse, and chestnut-back chickadee. So just gorgeous birds in their variety. And then insect eaters like this Buick's wren. We've had these nest in our yard, as well as a Townsend's warbler, which is gorgeous. I haven't seen those in our yard. And bush tits we see quite often as well. And then we have, nectar birds. So everybody sees hummingbirds constantly going and taking nectar. I think this is a sticky monkey flower here from one example. But for hummingbirds, only 20% of their diet is nectar. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then hooded orioles, which are not native to our area. They tend to be more in the Central Valley, and maybe you get them in the East Bay. We're over on the peninsula. But at the height of the drought, we did actually see one come through our neighborhood, which is a huge surprise and very thrilling. So let's talk a little bit more about insect eaters. This is a great picture. And this is actually something we didn't realize, that 80% of the diet for hummingbirds is insects and only 20% nectar. And we've seen hummingbirds go, along the fence or in our oak tree and kind of, be poking at spider webs and stuff. But it wasn't until, again, we heard one of these talks and we learned more about that. And this picture is actually exemplifies what Jennifer saw one night as we were sitting under our oak tree, and she could see the hummingbird's tongue going out and it was darting. And it wasn't until the light kind of changed, and all of a sudden she could see the shadow of the gnats and the fact the hummingbird was eating those gnats and stuff. So so these are some examples of the types of insects that they eat, but very important, in terms of being able to feed this ecosystem. Not everybody's living on things like nectar or pollen when it comes to the birds. And then hummingbird babies eat almost exclusively insects. So that becomes very important as well. And I think a lot of this really kind of crystallized for Jennifer and I when we saw Doug Tallamy's talk on Nature's Best Hope. Doug states that 96% of terrestrial birds, rely on insects to feed their youngs. And the most important source of that food is caterpillars for a number of different reasons. Caterpillars are rich in carotenoids. They provide a lot of the things that baby birds need in order to grow. They're very soft. So literally, the parents are able to push them down into the stomachs of the babies. And then, they're very economical in terms of being able to hunt for them. One caterpillar can represent 250 aphids. You think about the amount of work that it would take to corral 250 aphids and deliver those. But the interesting thing is that these caterpillars generally have co-evolved to eat only certain native host plants. And so they're looking for a particular plant on which, to survive. And this is where the butterflies and moths then lay their eggs. So you may be familiar with, for instance, monarch butterflies and their need for milkweed as a place to be able to put their caterpillars. But most of the butterflies and moths that we see in California, same thing. They're co-evolved with a particular plant in many cases. There are some that can survive with multiple plants. But it becomes very important for us to make sure that we have that we give them access to these plants and that we're using these plants in our gardening in order to provide that capability and to provide the food that they need.
Question. Do you want me to advance the slides for you?
I think I'm okay.
Some people are chattering about that. You'll see as well.
Sure. If you could share,
I know.
oh, that'd be great. All right, Jennifer's going to share, and then she can advance the slides for me. Thank you, Jennifer. Meanwhile, I will continue to talk a little bit about Doug Tallamy and the slide that I was on, where there's a great big article from the New York Times saying the insect apocalypse is here. Obviously newspaper headlines tend to be pretty dramatic. But I think it's true in this case. There's a lot of things that we're dealing with here. And so what that means is, for the future of our birds, we don't see enough food supply. And that is why I think we're seeing fewer birds. To some degree, the war on bugs has been won, and there's just not as much food. So in a recent talk, Dr. Tallamy said that we could hit the point of no return in about 16 years. The critical mass of insects has declined to the point they can no longer support our ecosystems. We hear about pollinators as one, particular type of insect that we care about. But as we just mentioned, the role of feeding birds, the role of breaking down waste products. There's all sorts of roles for insects that we need. And there are so many insects that are crucial to the way that the world works. So what is causing this severe decline? Let's see if Jennifer, if we've caught up, are we in sync? Okay, thank you. So we see, development amongst other things that is causing, a lot of problems. There is just such a volume of development happening. Our homes are built on land that had previously sustained insects for millions of years. We see introduced plant species. We've replaced native species with species that don't provide food for caterpillars and other insects. We see the increase in agriculture and monoculture and tilling that stresses land use. The use of pesticides, which kills pollinators and their ability to function, and herbicides, which kill the native plants that feed so many of these insects at their larval stage. And then with climate change, we have extreme weather and fire impact, impacting insect survival. And so we may feel helpless, in the face of all this, but we can actually start to make this change right here in our own backyard and in your own communities. And I think that that's the positive message that comes out of this is there is a way that we can actually have an impact, and native gardening has a big element of that. So let's see
I'll
here.
jump to that. First thing.
Okay, thank you. Um, so plants, have such a key role because they serve as a basis for life on Earth. They convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. They convert the sun's energy into food. Our native plants have co-evolved with these various insects and other animals to provide food for the entire ecosystem. They are the biggest converter of the sun's energy, and in particular, keystone native plants for, your particular region. Obviously, there's different native plants for every region that people live in. Our focus here tonight is mostly about the Bay Area. But the number one food source for all these global ecosystems, and there's a lot of different elements to this story. But let's go on to the next slide here for a second. And Jennifer and I consider ourselves caterpillar farmers. So we think about how can we grow more caterpillars and therefore more birds, and we need to feed them. And so what we see are green bars on the left that are the California native keystone plants, things like oaks, which support over 250 different types of bugs, and Lepidoptera. We see a hollyleaf cherry there, the Prunus ilicifolia. We see currants, California lilac or ceanothus. So we see a number of different plants that we're familiar with, and these plants are actually providing food for the Lepidoptera, at their many different stages of their life cycle. On the right, unfortunately, we see a lot of the imported plants that create what we call a food desert, acacia, agapanthus, eucalyptus, ice plant, ivy. All of these things have been brought in and started and are used all the time in gardening. And the thing about it is, to me, the native plants are more beautiful and more varied and have so much more capability to provide a really lush garden for folks. And quite often, a lot easier to maintain. That we just, again, it's about mindset. We need to change this mindset and get people on board with understanding what the value is of these native plants. Our entire nation's planted with imported plants. And one big example is the 40 million acres of lawn, which is creating a huge food deficit for pollinators and other insects. That is the biggest crop in all of America. And that's obviously sucking up all sorts of water and other types of resources. It's causing people to use things like fertilizers and other kinds of things. So they really, trying to make that conversion like we did, we made the choice to move from a lawn to native plants, is a huge part of this as well. Okay, so next slide. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's talk about step 2 now, choosing our native plants. And the rest of these steps are going to go much faster. So we need to think about growing berries for the birds that we talked about that are berry eaters. And so plants that are in the sun, like this elderberry, Sambucus mexicana on the left here, with these gorgeous blue berries that actually are edible by humans too. You can do things with them like make elderberry wine or things. And then manzanita as well, which is just such a workhorse plant in California. There's a manzanita for every occasion. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. They have all sorts of different requirements. So it's such a great flexible plant for us to use. Let's go on to the next slide. Toyon, as we love, and we just talked about a little bit for the cedar waxwings, two different varieties here. The lower one is the Toyon Davis Gold. Jennifer and I are growing both of these in our yard, although our Davis Gold has not yet come forth with berries and stuff, but we're still early in our stages. And so we'll look forward to any of you that come to the tour to be able to see both our standard Toyons and our Toyon Davis Gold. Okay, next slide. Great, thank you. A couple of berry growers that are part shade and sun for shrubs. This Nevin's barberry, Berberis nevini, which is one that we have looked at and love quite a bit. And then Oregon grape, which is we have one example in our yard as well. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to flip through these fairly quickly because I know we have a lot of questions. Coffee berry. And if you see coffee berry in our yard, you'll see that it is used. And from the moment, literally, like while it was still in the pots, we started seeing holes appearing in there as caterpillars and leafcutter bees were immediately attracted to it. We got ours from California Native Landscape Nursery in Mill Valley. The plants were so healthy, and immediately the bees came. They were starting to bloom and everything. So a tremendous plant that you'll see used all throughout our garden. And then evergreen huckleberry, which is a newer one to us, but we're starting to plant that as well. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Pete. And then for ground covers, who knew that there were native strawberries in California? This is a woodland strawberry as one example. There is also a beach strawberry example. You'll see both in our yard. One is meant for sun and one is meant for shade. In our case, we actually mixed them up, but they're so hardy they've thrived anyway. So in spite of our mistakes, they're continuing to live. And then a bearberry, another Arctostaphylos type of a bird, and we have a typo there with Arctostaphylos. Apologies. And then growing nectar. So here are some shrubs for part shade. Ribes sanguineum or pink flowered currant. This is one of our favorites. We have some of these in our yard. And the Ribes speciosum or fuchsia flowered gooseberry, which is probably the thorniest plant in the world. Jennifer got pricked by one and got an infection. We have a couple of examples of these in our yard as well. They are gorgeous. The hummingbirds love the flowers so much. We always joke about this being a plant that if there's some place where you don't want people or animals to go to, it's a great plant to go ahead and put in that place. We have a beautiful sphinx moth here, which is nectaring on a hummingbird sage. We have some of that in our yard as well, and native honeysuckle. We replaced a old Chilean jasmine that we had with this native honeysuckle, so we're very excited about that as well. We have next some sticky monkey flower, which we have a very wonderful example. It's actually a couple of different plants, but they're all growing together and they make this big bushy area. That's going very well. We love those. And then bee plants. So these are great for part shade to full sun. Bee plant we have growing, underneath our oak tree. So it's pretty tolerant and has managed to survive that. But these are some great examples of things. And then a manzanita here. I'm not sure exactly which manzanita this is, but Pete could probably tell us. Pete is the expert on manzanitas. And so whenever we do our tour, we love to pick a Friday and say, okay, we've got the weekend to plant things. We're going to do a tour, and we'll make sure that we stop by and see Pete along the way and make that one of our stops. We've bought many plants there, gorgeous plants that are very healthy. We put them in the ground, they just immediately take and start growing like crazy. And then a sage here as well. And you'll see a couple examples of these in our yard. And frankly, those are the plants that if you put them in a sunny enough spot, you're going to be clipping them back. You're going to be telling, hold on there. We have to have other plants. So they're great. They're really good, especially in very hot, sunny spots. For growing seeds, buckwheats of all sorts. Here we have this beautiful red buckwheat. We have a number of different varieties in our yard. The sage I mentioned. We have asters. We have purple haze right now blooming in our front yard. They're gorgeous and the bees love them. Goldenrod, as I mentioned, for seeds. And California poppies. Jennifer showed that one picture where you could see on our front yard, we had the moonglow poppies all along the front walkway last year, which was a great way for us to kick off the tour. So And then grasses, for growing seeds. A couple things I love about grasses, they root very deep. Because of that, they're great for erosion control, and they're also great for sequestering carbon. They take a lot of carbon out of the air and push it in the ground, and they provide beautiful textures. And so that's one of the things that that you'll see as you look at um, some of the gardens that are designed. Is it Nancy that has the signature? Kelly, sorry, Kelly has that signature plant, Mendocino reedgrass, I believe it is. We're growing some of that in our yard. We had originally tried to do a kind of a meadow underneath our oak tree that didn't work out so well. So we've switched to the Mendocino reedgrass, which is really starting to come along. But these are great ways to grow seeds. And then growing nuts. So oak trees, anything of the Quercus species. We have a wonderful, huge, probably 200-year-old valley oak in our front yard. What a great way to start your native garden, to have something like that already there and established. So very fortunate to start with that. Beaked hazelnut, Southern California black walnut, and the California wax myrtle here at the bottom, where the seeds the nuts are very small. They're almost like seeds. So, okay. Step 3, examine your garden situation. Is it big or is it small? Where is the sun and where is the shade? Where is it wet? Where is it dry? What kind of soil do you have? Clay, sand, or loam? We did find that for us, when we started leaving the leaves from our oak tree, our clay soil started to break down and become much more receptive, both to plants and to a shovel, which was great for me. So those are some of the things that you can look at. This picture at the top, I believe, is from the Woodside Library Garden, which is gorgeous. And that is one of the places that we're going to, it actually says there in the caption, one of the places that we're going to tour on the day that we have folks over. So look forward to sharing that with you. It's wonderful. Okay, next one. This is an example of designing your own bird-friendly garden. First off, there's 3 books on the left here that we highly recommend. Designing California Native Gardens, California Native Gardens, Plants for the Garden, and the California Wildlife Habitat Garden. We read these and we found them extremely useful to help us to start to categorize, where to put different plants. Finding the right plants for your area, using something like Cowscape to be able to figure out what's going to make the most sense. Figuring out things like how tall the plants are and thinking about how you stack the plants, in a way that they're visually appealing so that they continue to further on throughout the yard as you look at it. We attended virtual and in-person garden tours. I remember our first tour that we attended that Kathy put on, and just immediately we were just blown away at how lush the gardens were, how the native plants can really provide a beautiful, lush, garden for folks. So you can sketch out ideas, or you can hire a professional, as Kathy mentioned, or you don't need fancy software or skills. You could do what we did, and Jennifer got out her colored pencils and sketched our garden. So you could see in the lower left, the QL, Quercus lobata, that's our big valley oak tree. You can see the things that we were growing around it. I will say that this is 2 to 3 years old and has gone through a lot of change since we originally started this. So you can come see where it ended up, or at least where it currently is at this point in its life. But this is a great way to list the plants we're considering, referring back to those books and thinking about plant communities. That was, I think, a big deal for us because, as Jennifer has marked here in the lower left, our cafe garden, the area that's kind of between the house and the oak tree, very shady area, so that's one thing. And then as we move up towards the top where the street is, we start to get sunnier and sunnier. And as we get over to the right, past the courtyard garden, it gets very sunny and very hot outside of the drip line of the oak tree. And that's where we have like our sages and things like that really love that heat. And then we've got a number of Arctostaphylos. We have some Louis Edmond, and we have a beautiful Dr. Hurd, which is really starting to come on in terms of its growth, and it's huge. And I've seen so many people come to our house and look at that and go, what is that? And people start writing down. You could tell, Pete, they're coming to see you. We told them to come see you and get one of those. So so this is an idea of how it could look, and you'll be able to see how this compares to the current reality. Step 5, as I mentioned, planting in layers. Here we have the red flowered buckwheat and things in the front. But then, you know, we start to see other things kind of coming up and stacking in the back all the way to the manzanita, and then the red bud at the very back. I believe that there's even a ribes in here. So this allows us to have a nice visual view, but also notice that we've got small trees along the fence and along the bird bath. And there were some questions about how do we facilitate a bird bath and how do we make that, you know, available for the birds? And thinking about the birds want to have a clear space where they can see around them if there's any predators, but also have a place to quickly jump to if a predator does appear. So having some cover is an example here. Okay, let's go to the next one here. This is another shot of the same garden from a different angle. And so here you see poppies, you see some sulfur buckwheat, some penstemon, the kind of purple along the walkway there. You know, beautiful flowers, and again, you know, just this burst of color going on here. But these different angles allow you to see again how it's planted for this view, and being able to see different elements of the height. And then can you go back? One thing I forgot to point out, Jennifer, in this one, the bird bath notice is kind of got a clear view of the windows. And just like Jennifer and I did, and that's how I was able to get the bluebird photo, is the bird bath is somewhere proximate to the windows, enough that you could see the view, but also you want to have it far enough away so that it doesn't provide a problem for the birds, that they start bouncing into the windows and having collisions and stuff. So I just wanted to note that because I think that picture illustrates it very well. Okay, let's roll forward. One more, there we go. So there is actually our bird bath right there, right, and the coffee berry in the foreground you can see, which, you know, it's got a lot of little holes in it and stuff from the bugs. Guess what? Once you step back 5 or 10 feet, you can't see those anymore. But it's providing, you know, food for and tools for, you know, in the case of the leafcutter bees, tools for them to you know, have their babies and stuff. As habitat gardeners, we love this. Every time we see a plant that's getting used, we're like, that's successful. In our back, we have some apricot mallows that literally the leaves started to disappear. It was like lace for a while, and then they're almost gone. We're like, okay, something's really eating that. We went out and got 6 more. You know, we're putting those in the ground. So that's again a mindset. Our mindset is we're trying to feed all these animals and really provide a place where they can feel at home and stuff. So that's our cafe garden. And then I mentioned about providing shelter. So one of the key things here is prune conservatively. Don't prune during the nesting times of year. So we always wait and kind of prune kind of more October, like right before the rains and stuff. But again, pruning can, you know, leave nests exposed to rain, wind, sun, cats, and other predators. So be very careful about that. All right, next slide. And then providing shelter. Luckily for us, our valley oak provides shelter for a lot of cavity nesters. We also have some old trees that we've left as they've died. We've actually stopped watering our yard for the most part, and so we're starting to see some of the trees that were there originally starting to go away. The other way to do it is to buy or make a bird nesting box. We put one up and immediately had chickadees in there. There are some best practices, you know, put it on a pole to avoid predation. Open it away from the direct sun. You don't want it directly in the sun, you know, where it gets too hot, especially with the summers we're having. I think this picture is beautiful, but, you know, and it shows the bird, the bluebird with the wings spread. It violates a couple of those rules, but we'll let that pass. It's a beautiful photo. Okay, next one. And then providing nesting materials, you know, leaving things around a little bit. Again, being a little bit less human centric. So if you're leaving cobwebs, if you're leaving you know, branches and leaves and different things that the birds might gather to use to create their or grass clippings and things like that. You know, just different things that that could be used. So important to do that. We've created a couple small brush piles in our yard. Creating a spot with damp mud is also great. That's great for the butterflies who absorb a lot of the minerals through the mud through their feet. So that's important to provide as well. We also don't put out any synthetic materials, you know, things like lint from our dryer, because so many of our clothes are made of plastic these days. So very important to do that as well. Providing water. Here's my bluebird picture. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time we've seen it tonight. I think the one thing that's hard about bird baths and bird feeders and things is the maintenance, right? You really have to keep on them. I think some really key things for us with this one. It's concrete, so it's a little harder to clean. I think if it was ceramic, it'd be a little easier. Scrub it weekly. We use vinegar. Don't use soap because it will break down the oil in the bird's feathers. And don't use bleach because that's unhealthy for them too. But a little bit of vinegar doesn't bother them. And so we use that. We take that in a scrub brush and kind of scrub this out every week. And then protect your bird habitat. Step 8, it's estimated that 600 million to 1 billion birds are killed in building strikes every year. I mean, that's just a staggering number of birds. And key culprits are windows. As we can see here, there are a couple of examples. And Kathy, on the tour, we saw one of the yards, the garden, the owners had done a lot about being able to avoid collisions. It was a really, really informative visit. And so that's one thing, keeping your feeders and bird baths away from windows as much as possible, using screens or safety film. And then another one that folks don't often think of, but reducing light pollution around your home. Encouraging your neighbors to turn off their lights, and because it has a couple of impacts. For things like moths, it's very confusing. For birds who are migrating at night, it's very confusing as well. And who wouldn't rather see the Milky Way than see, just a dull sky cover? So I think that's a great example there. All right, and then there were a lot of questions about cats, and I have to admit, Jennifer and I love cats. We have had cats, for quite a few years. Originally, our cats were outdoor cats, but then we started to understand not just how many birds they kill, but actually the life expectancy impact on cats. I think this is one of the key things if you love cats. An indoor cat life expectancy is 10 to 13 years. An outdoor cat, 2 to 7 years. They're hit by cars, they get in fights, they get diseases. We lost a couple of cats to things like rat poison in our neighborhood. They can get preyed upon by coyotes and mountain lions. So the big solution that we see is catios. So here's some examples of some pretty cool cats enjoying their catios. And you might do something modest like this, or if you're really audacious, on the next slide, you might decide to build a catio that looks like this, which is pretty amazing. But so it's only limited by your space, budget, and imagination. Okay, let's see, where are we at, Jennifer? How many more slides do we have to go? Oh, this is such an important point. Protecting your bird habitat by leaving the leaves and acorns. This made a big difference for us, a couple of different ways. We left the leaves. Definitely there was food going on in the leaves. There were things living in the leaves. We saw the birds constantly turning over our oak tree leaves and looking underneath and finding food. We left the acorns, and all of a sudden we have a lot of volunteer oaks. But I think the other thing that's interesting is if you have a problem with deer and you have an oak tree, don't have your gardener sweep up all the acorns and take them away. The deer come to our yard, they eat the acorns, and they leave the plants alone. They're so much happier with the acorns. But we used to have a gardener who would sweep all that away for us, bag it up, take it down to the dump, and turn into methane gas. Now this is a much better ecosystem that we have going by providing those and leaving those things in. If you do move your leaves around, we clear our walkways and things like that. Don't shred them. There are living things in there, so if you just move them gently, I think that's a better thing. But it's had such a big impact on our garden, and as I mentioned, our clay soil. Suddenly, I was able to put the shovel right into the hilt, whereas the year before I had to take a pick and really to try and plant our manzanitas. Encouraging caterpillars. Jennifer loves caterpillars because frankly, they're a lot easier to photograph than butterflies. They stay still, but they are gorgeous in their own way. I love this one on the left-hand side in the middle. It looks like it's going to the prom. It's got its hair all up and everything. But they're, such an important part of this ecosystem, becoming butterflies and moths. And I think, frankly, there are a lot of people who don't get it at first, and they go, "Oh, there's bugs on my plant," and they start taking away the caterpillars, and then they wonder why they didn't have any butterflies. So, and then in the lower right, we've got an example of a cocoon that's there on the ground. I think for years, Jennifer and I saw those things and never realized what they were. But some of these, will overwinter on the ground, and so those are the types of things that you just don't want to sweep away. So. Pesticides and herbicides, Jennifer and I have been organic gardeners since we first met, and probably actually, frankly, all of our lives, even before we met, because we really believe in that balance and letting things, go and they'll find its own balance. Some of these herbicides, such as Roundup, have been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a big part of liver damage. Like, we just don't want to be around them. We shop organically. We do find also that quite often you bring home plants from other places, other nurseries, big box nurseries that have been treated with neonicotinoids. And so all of a sudden the other bugs in your ecosystem are dying because these plants have been treated. This is one of the reasons that we go to the native nurseries and buy plants that we know are safe for the bugs and stuff. But it's just a super important part. And the other thing that we find over and over is these systems have a way of righting themselves. Jennifer and I had chickens. We started getting a lot of flies. We decided not to do anything about it. A couple weeks later, we started noticing phoebes and barn swallows coming into our yard and eating up the flies, and they got things back in balance. Or if you have, aphids on your plants, all of a sudden the hummingbirds start discovering the aphids, and other predators. So they're a good food source. So you don't want to break those chains in the food, tree and the way that, these different things are needed and necessary for providing the whole ecosystem. Okay. Engage and inspire others, learn these types of things, and then start taking part. Go on the tours and meet a lot of other people who are interested in this. That's been super fun for us. We've loved that. We have also opened our house to being on tours. We just love talking to people that are into this. This middle picture is from our yard. As I mentioned, the moon glow poppies along the front. Not there this year, but that was a year or two ago. And then, we'd love to see you come up here and give a talk as well, because everybody's got something to share and everybody's learned something interesting that they're excited and passionate about and they can share with people. All right, let's go on to the next one. And there's our grandson, Trey, getting involved. Charlie is also here. He's helping with some of the questions in the chat, and he's taken some of these photos. And so we're getting everybody engaged. Frankly, all of our family can't help but be engaged in this process. But take action, volunteer, invite people to come, give a talk, and then just start learning more. I think the more you share, the more you learn. And it's a fascinating topic. Okay, some great tools. If you don't already know about calscape.org, you're so lucky to live in California, because Calscape is such a tremendous resource for us. There's a fellow who put together this database, and he understood all the purposes of different types of metadata. So now you can go in there and say, I want a ground cover, or I want a shrub, or I want a tree, and my spot is, it's hot and sunny, or it's shady, or it'll have a lot of water, it'll be very dry. And you can then all of a sudden get a list of different plants that will work in your area for those different types of needs. And so this also maps to the Lepidoptera, which butterflies and moths are native to your area and what they need. So you can create plant lists, and then you can reach out to the nurseries that carry these plants. So highly recommend Calscape as you start thinking about your different areas of your garden and what you want to put in. iNaturalist, which we love. We are always taking photos of things and wondering what it is, and so we'll pop them into iNaturalist. We have it on our phones, and that becomes a great way to also just kind of catalog the things you see in our gardens. Some of the different lizards that we're starting to see, and tracking those, for instance. So you can put in your observations. You can get other people, collaborating with you and providing thoughts about what they're seeing and stuff. So great one there. And then I'm assuming that everybody here knows about Merlin, but if you don't, you can thank me later, because Merlin is so amazing. This is a Sunday morning at our house, and you can see all these different birds. We're out in our backyard and whistling and chirping and cheering and stuff. It's just wonderful to sit back there and to be able to hear all these calls. And this can be an app that you can put on either your iPhone or your Android phone. And then it will save this. It will save the recording. It'll list the birds. As the birds make calls, they light up, so you can start to get to know what the different calls are of the different birds. Just can't emphasize how much fun this is, and how much we've, with the kids, gone out and looked at this. And then when we went to Australia, Jennifer got the Australia pack. And so she was able to identify the native birds of Australia while we were there, which was super. She got up at 4 a.m. She's crazy. All right, let's go to the next one. Cornell University is all about birds. It's a huge treasure trove, so highly recommend you go there and learn more. Let's zip through the last few because I realize I'm going over time now.
You're not. You take your time, Brian. Don't feel you have to rush.
Thank you, Kathy. We have our local CNPS chapters, and that was actually how we got started. It was the Santa Clara Valley CNPS chapter and their talk with Doug Tallamy that really got us going on all of this. But we've seen, Kate Marienchild and John Kehoe and all sorts of people give talks that, every time we learn something new, and we just are so amazed at how these ecosystems have co-evolved and some of the intricacies of how they interact and stuff. It's just such a miracle. And I think the more you learn, the more fascinating it gets. So, all right, let's try the next one. So these are some resources that you can refer to later and get more access. Let's scroll to the next one here. These are some specific ones about a bird-friendly garden. So different things from CNPS and talks, the Cornell Ornithology Lab, as we just talked about, the Bay Area Audubon Society chapters. So those are the Golden Gate Bird Alliance in particular, a couple of different places to reach out to and learn more about this. So, and some more links for you, and then let's keep going. I love this. Jennifer put this in. A final thought. Habitat gardening helps us develop compassion for those who share the earth with us, and it empowers us to help them thrive. And to me, that's what it's all about. I just love looking at these animals and realizing that, not necessarily that they're under my care, but that we coexist and taking care of each other. And I feel like there's a communication that goes on. We've got a couple of a raccoon and her babies living in our oak tree right now. And it's just so fascinating to see and to hear when the babies get in there after they've fed at night. They purr. Our oak tree actually purrs. I mean, just those kinds of interactions that you get, without, intruding and stuff. It's golden to me. I love that so much. So, all right. So I think we'll go to questions. Here's a little bit of information. I put this link into the chat, so I can do that again here as we go into the Q&A. And yeah, Kathy, I'll turn it back over to you, I think, at this point.
Thank you very much, Brian. So I want to compliment you too on working under pressure there with your slide difficulties. I thought you managed very well.
Thanks.
It wasn't what you had thought, but it was great from my end. It was just great.
Appreciate it.
Before we go on to questions, I'm going to pause for just a moment and do a little tour support request. If you enjoyed Brian's presentations, if you've enjoyed the programs that we put on, I hope you'll support us. You can support the tour by donating now on the Garden Tours, Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours website under Please Donate. You can use your credit card or PayPal there, through Venmo at Bringing Back the Natives, or you can mail a check. And if you don't get the address now, our contact information is on the tour's website under Contact Us. So let me now say a few things. People had asked, how can I get the information that went by rather quickly on these slides? So in about an hour, I think this program will be up on YouTube. And you can go there and you can freeze the frames on YouTube and take pictures of it or copy down what you like. We'll also be sending out information that was put into the chat after this presentation to everybody that emailed. So would you be interested in sending your slide deck, Brian, or having a link to your deck for people who just want to access your slides?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. So hopefully anybody can look in the chat and see that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Let me just cover a couple of things before I open it up to questions. So the Pete that Brian was rhapsodizing about is Pete VU. He's the owner of East Bay Wild's Native Plant Nursery in Oakland. Pete designs gardens, he does consultations, he maintains and installs gardens, and he has this fantastic native plant nursery, and he's actually online with us tonight. So if you are interested in purchasing plants or have any questions for Pete, you could probably pop some questions into the chat this evening. I want to say that on August the 3rd, you can go and see Brian and Jennifer's garden, and you can join the native plant resource teams to be able to sign up for that multi-activity, choose your own adventure day on August the 3rd. That will be at their garden in San Carlos, then going to the just really nice San Carlos Civic Center to see the pollinator garden that's been put in there. It was a joint project between the city of San Carlos and Master Gardeners, and then going down to the spectacular native plant garden at the Woodside Library that Jennifer introduced me to. So let us go now to, and maybe I'll open it up to Jeff and Valerie if you want to pop in and answer any questions. I saw that there were some questions about bird strikes, and I'd like to say a couple things and then turn it over to anybody on the panel here who'd like to pipe in. So I know that you might think, well, birds aren't hitting my windows, but actually during the pandemic, a researcher who was working at home set up a video camera and noted that he only saw about 1 in 10 of the bird strikes that occurred on his home. So you may think that birds aren't hitting your windows, but they probably are. And actually, most birds, I understand, don't survive bird strikes. You might see them stagger away, but they hit hard and fast with their heads. And I think that the idea is they actually don't survive bird strikes. So a great product is available from Feather Friendly, and it's little dots that you can put across your windows, and you put them on the outside of the window. And they look just great because you can still see through your window between the dots, but the birds won't crash into your windows. You can also put up screens. We put up screens on our house, and they actually have stopped their bird collisions completely.
I just put up a link to things to put on your windows. So there's a whole bunch of them there in the chat.
Okay, great. And I know there were a lot of questions about cats and what people can do about cats. There's your own cat, which is keep it indoors, keep it in a catio. And Jeff, can you say anything about what to do if it's not your cat? It's neighbors' cats, it's feral cats. I know it's a tough.
Yeah. The first thing is, if you know who the owner is, talk to them and tell them what you're trying to do. And if they could please keep their cat inside. If they're not cooperative with that or refuse, then I posted a bunch of things in the chat about what to do. I'll post it again right now. But basically, you can do what someone already said, and that is try spraying them with your hose. Or you said it. That's right, with your AR-15 squirt gun.
AR-15 hose, squirt gun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a squirt gun. I want to make that clear. Yeah, squirt them with water. It doesn't hurt them, but they don't like it. And if you do it enough times, they might stay away. You can also use smells that cats don't like. And there's a list in the thing that I just posted. Oops, I'm posting it right now. Okay, there it is. Things like homemade repellents made from natural ingredients like citrus, coffee, garlic, ammonia, vinegar, mustard, pipe tobacco, citronella, eucalyptus, or cayenne pepper. There are some plants that repel cats. I don't know how well it works, like rue. You can get motion activated sprinklers, although set them up so they don't spray delivery people or the mail, the person delivering mail. Let's see. You can try, they're supposedly ultrasonic animal repellents. I don't know how well they work. You can make digging uncomfortable. You can put chicken wire under the soil. You can use sharp-edged mulch, a plastic carpet runner upside down under the soil. So when they try to dig to pee or poo, it makes them uncomfortable. They don't like it. And then remove potential cat shelters, places where cats would like to hang out, like trim bushes, make sure that they can't get into a shed or a garage so that they're hanging out there. You could get a dog. That's another solution.
I saw that Lucille has mentioned the cat bib. And Lucille, maybe you could just post in the chat if you have used the cat bib yourself or know anyone who has. But cat bibs are a little collar that goes around the cat's neck that has a little bib that hangs in the front. So the cats can still move around, they can still climb trees, but it just slows them down a little bit. It slows them down enough so that birds have more of a chance to get away, because bells don't work. Birds are not bird. A bell to a bird doesn't mean I'm in danger. It just means, oh, that's an interesting sound. I hear a bell. Ouch. So you could try a cat bib. I don't have a cat, but I've heard from people who've owned cats that the bibs are helpful and the cats don't mind them.
I
All
didn't know
right.
that one.
I saw a question about bird feeders, and Valerie, maybe you can pipe in about if you have feeders or how you feel that you provide food for birds.
I don't have feeders. Can you hear me, Kathy?
I hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. I don't have feeders in my garden. I just plant plants that provide what the birds need, as much as I can tell, using Calscape. Thank goodness for Calscape. Feeders, you're always dealing with squirrels, and it's very hard to outwit a squirrel. I can't deal with animals that are smarter than I am. Squirrels are definitely in that category, although there are some caged feeders with cages around them that are pretty good for deterring squirrels. But the other issue with feeders is the dropping of the seeds. So you have to be prepared to have rodents. Pretty much, if you have not just squirrels as rodents, but rats and mice will come under the feeder. And it's very hard to keep the area under a feeder free of seed. It's just a lot of work. So I have relied on the plants basically. And I've had 48 species of birds in my garden, and it's so interesting out there. So I think that I don't need the feeders, but I understand people who are fascinated by birds and don't have a lot of territory where they can provide all of the food through plants. I understand that. But when you hang a feeder, you just have to realize. And the other thing about feeders is that they tend to be a vector for disease because they bring in so many birds. And if just one of those birds is sick, it can get communicated to the other birds. And of course, someone mentioned that a Cooper's hawk had visited their garden. Well, that's part of the balance of nature too. But Cooper's hawks have really gotten onto feeders. So, if the birds are just sitting ducks for Cooper's hawks because they're smart birds and they know where it's easy picking. Other than that, I suppose you could do suet. Apparently they have suet with hot pepper in it, capsaicin, and the birds don't taste hot peppers. That doesn't bother them. Seed mixtures also have hot peppers, and apparently that's discouraging to squirrels. So, you can try all those things for sure.
I want to say that I had feeders many years ago, like probably 30 years ago, when I did not have a native plant garden, but now I do have a native plant garden. And even though my garden is not very large, our lot is just 5,000 square feet. We just got our 37th species of bird that I've seen in our garden over the last 20 years. And that's without bird feeders. We just have a nice selection of native plants, and I leave the seeds on the plants. I don't deadhead or take things down anymore. I can't do it. Ever since I heard a couple of hosts tell me that they went out in the morning and saw native bees sleeping under the dried heads of their yarrow flowers. So what could be more cute than these like bachelor longhorn bees having slumber parties on the dried heads of flowers? So I don't even deadhead anything anymore. And it's been surprising to me like how long the birds are out there pecking at the Clarkia. Long after I would think all the food would be gone from them, they're still finding insects or seeds or something in there to keep them going. So even a small garden, like, mine is relatively small, can be a great haven for birds. Let's see. Somebody asked if it's better to have a wide diversity of plant species or fewer species and more of them. And does anybody want to take that question? Or I'd be happy to. Fewer species, more of them, so that the butterflies or the moths can find the plants, because first they have to find the plant, and then there has to be enough nectar or pollen for the creature that comes to make it worthwhile. So they don't want to have to fly to like one plant and then, if they're lucky on the next neighbor's lot, they find one plant. They need plants that are grouped. So really planting fewer species of plants in greater numbers is better for wildlife. You guys feel free and help me look through these questions. And somebody pointed out that their rats have big fluffy tails. So,
Oh,
attract rats to our yard. Birdseed.
roof rats. Those are roof rats, yeah.
Okay. So Catherine noted that she raised her bird bath on concrete blocks and she put roses in containers around the base to help keep the cats away. I saw somebody who had a large bird bath on the ground and she put a big wide plastic kind of bib around the bird bath so the birds could fly in and get out, but the cats couldn't come up from the ground.
Kathy, you're getting very faint for me. I don't know if that for anyone else.
Mike,
I can see her.
am I visually faint or am I like orally faint?
It was getting auditorially faint, but maybe it's
Okay.
just me.
Okay, let me know if it keeps
Okay.
up. Let's see. You, Jeff or Valerie, do you want to talk about like the importance of keeping bird baths clean or bird feeders clean?
Both of them have to be kept clean. You just don't put them out and then walk away. My feeder, my bird bath that they use the most is just a terracotta plant saucer, which is onto a drip system for plants on a patio. It goes every day. It's raised up on a patio, so it's pretty safe from cats. It's about 12 feet off the ground. And I just go out every other day and lift it up and bring it in and wash it off with vinegar and water, rinse it well, and put it back so I can keep it clean very easily. I know hummingbird feeders are a huge problem if they're not kept clean because the fungal growth in the water kills the hummingbirds. And there's a lot of care that has to be taken with these things that we put out. Jeff probably has more to add to that.
I don't want to discourage people from putting out feeders. I had feeders out for years when I lived in Santa Cruz. I don't have any yet here in Alameda, but yeah, you have to watch them and make sure you don't get fungal growth, like you said. But if the hummingbirds are coming, they'll empty it, and you'll have to take it in to put new food in it anyway. So you might as well clean it when you're refilling it. So that was my standard. If I ever saw, something growth in there, of course I cleaned it very carefully and so on. But just pay attention to the feeders and keep them clean. And it doesn't have to be an everyday thing, but if you get a smaller hummingbird feeder, then of course you'll be filling it and cleaning it more frequently. That'd be my advice.
Thank you. Jennifer, someone had asked about what were the best plants, what were the keystone species that would bring butterflies and moths and birds in. Would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. Boy, all of them. So I think the oak, letting the oak really enjoy its full life cycle of dropping acorns and leaving the leaves. That was probably the best single plant contributor in our garden and best practice instead of sweeping that away. The birds love buckwheats. If you start them from seeds, I recommend that you put a screen over it because my buckwheats were coming up as little seedlings and I thought they were dying off, but actually a chickadee was coming and nipping the little greens like a little salad all the time. So buckwheats are great. They're great for seeds. They grow lots of bugs. We had chickadees. Our oak tree's full for the first time actually now. Our oak tree has usually we'd have several bird species, but we never had bluebirds before this year. And I think I attribute it to a lot of our keystone plants are growing insects. Coffee berries growing a lot of insects. Apricot mallow isn't native to our area. It's growing a lot of insects. And I've heard some people kind of freak out like, oh, caterpillars are eating my whole plant. But I watch the chickadees take the caterpillars and feed them to their babies. And so I love the birds frankly, more than I love the apricot mallow. So I just bought more and planted more and let it get eaten. I don't know, Brian, if you had other plants that you thought were particularly,
Yeah,
great.
no, I was just showing the slide that we'd put into the deck because I thought it was a good reminder. I think the funny thing to me is always when you see a bird eat a caterpillar, there's always that moment of good for the bird, but you feel also bad for the caterpillar slash butterfly that could have been. And so that's just part of the course. But yeah, I think leaving the leaves for us was a huge thing, and then adding these plants. And having the diversity of the plants so that there's something for everybody. So
I noticed somebody talked about the fact they have a small San Francisco garden, don't have room for an oak tree. That's certainly true for lots of folks, but there are small oak trees too. There's Quercus berberitifolia, which is California scrub oak. It only gets to be 3 to 7 feet tall, and it produces acorns and nurtures all those insects. So not every oak is huge. Mostly they are, though, but
completely
there's,
agree, Valerie. We have a valley oak, which is massive, but we
oh
also
yeah.
see coast live oaks, which can be much smaller, and then, like you said, scrub oaks. And then we also see people in our neighborhood who have cut the oaks in various ways to keep them, in some cases, topping them so they didn't grow very tall. So it depended upon the situation. We have one up the street from us that looks more like a shrub or a bush, but yet it's providing that food and that habitat. So you can shape them if you get the right type in the right situation.
I'd like to add that Doug Tallamy says that it's a very few species of plants that provide the bulk of the energy that drives the food web. And he calls those plants keystone species. And so using Doug Tallamy's data, Jennifer and I worked together on creating a list of our local keystone species. And if you go to the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours website, you'll find them about 2/3 of the way down the navigation bar. And we have 40 species of native plants that provide the largest number of Lepidoptera, of butterflies and moths, with the plants that they can lay their eggs on. So California lilac, 120 species of butterflies and moths can lay their eggs on them. Pink flowering currant, mountain mahogany, lupins, asters, goldenrod. Gosh, I can't even, Jennifer, can you rattle off any of the others that you know are on there? Fuchsia. So you'll find that list. And Jennifer made those signs, and she did such a beautiful job. If you've been on the garden tour the last couple of years, you'll see those signs in the gardens. But that's a great way for you to think, to just select the powerhouse plants right off the bat and make sure that you're getting as many of those as you can in your garden. Somebody asked how to join the Native Plant Resource Teams. So at this point, you can just go to Google and type in Native Plant Resource Teams, and you'll get to the website and you can join. It's free to join. It's free to go on our trips. You could also link over there from the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours website. There's a section that will take you over. Let's see. Panelists, any other questions that you feel that we didn't, that we want to answer live here? Just scrolling back and seeing, I'll take one more spin through the most recent questions. Let's see. So somebody asked, can you comment on the latest data and research on the benefits to wildlife of using the straight species using horticultural cultivars? Do you want to talk about that, Valerie, or is that not in your?
I just remember, what Doug Tallamy said about that. But this is ongoing research. I mean, we have to understand that. But he said one thing that clearly becomes a problem and reduces the value of a so-called native plant to wildlife is when the flower is doubled, because a double flower makes it much more difficult for insects to access the pollen and the nectar. So doubling is a problem. And the other thing that he mentioned reduces the usefulness to wildlife is when plants are bred to have red leaves. Apparently, a lot of insects think of that as containing something that is harmful to them. Anthocyanins, I believe, is what Doug Tallamy said. But his feeling was that if it's in the same genus, pretty much, you know, and there are natural hybrids out there. Nature is always creating new crosses. And typically, you know, with these cultivated varieties, they can be cultivated by people or they can be naturally occurring hybrids. So I don't see that as necessarily such a terrible thing. And it certainly can create beautiful garden plants. But you can be very purist about it and want only the straight species. But in my garden, I have a lot of the cultivated varieties, and I see insects all over them. So what can you say?
Do you have any thoughts about that, Jennifer or Brian?
I think all of our coffee berries are some type of cultivar because we have the Eve case and the Mount San Bruno. I think the Mount Vision one is a pure. Pete would know. Oh, okay. Pete says a lot of the named cultivars are simply selections from the wild, so we're good. But yeah, I primarily go with what I observe being eaten. And sometimes when you're just starting out, like all you can find is a cultivar. So you know, it's tricky. I think getting to know the different nurseries, you know, Brian had alluded to, we'll do a tour and go over to like East Bay Wilds, then Oaktown, then Watershed, then CNL. We'll just do a whole circuit of nurseries in a day, or go out to lunch, have an adventure, you know, but talk to the nursery people at the native plant nurseries to get their take on it.
I'll say also that if people are interested in getting straight species, you can go to the Native Here Nursery near Tilden Park. You can view their plants online, and they carry only plants that they have grown from seed collected in Alameda and Contra Costa County. So you can browse by plants from Livermore or plants from Berkeley and see what they have that is actually genetically local to your site. So it looks like we are at the end of our time. I want to certainly thank all of our big team here that helped put this event on. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Brian, for the great presentation tonight. I want to say that this was recorded and it will be put up on YouTube in about an hour. You can see it. That way you could freeze frames if you wanted to see something. We'll send out the link to the slide deck along with all the links that were put into the chat. And just one last pitch. If you enjoyed this presentation, I hope you'll support the tour and the programs that we run. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah. Will you help save the chat? Do we have to do anything special?
Yes, go to where you type your message in the chat, and there's 3 buttons next to the smiley face. Click on that and then click Save Chat.
All
Did you
right.
catch that?
I've grabbed it as well, so I'll go
right.
ahead and
Okay.
email it. over.
Everybody save the chat. Now we're going to stop the recording and say thank you again and good night. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Kathy. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.